All right. Councillor Snook, Mayor Snook, Charlottesville.
Here.
Councillor Pinkston, Charlottesville.
Here.
Mr. Nelson, VDOT.
Here.
And Ms. Laundrie, VDOT. Here.
So I understand that we have a forum established, we need to vote to allow Julia Monteith, who is a non-voting member representing EBA.
Yes,
Into the meeting.
she indicated she would be joining us remotely. She's actually not on just yet, though. So when she does, well, she's non-voting, but we can wait till she comes on. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the first item of business is to see if there are any members of the public who would like to provide a comment with a limit of 3 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone in the room? See only the usual suspects. Okay. Is there anyone online?
Yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion, if I could, about the smart scale round 6 when you get to it. I recommended an alternate solution to the Route 22 250 US 250 intersection improvements. In round 5, there were 2 separate projects, one for US 250 and State Route 22, and a second one for Milton Road and US 250. The combined cost of which was over $20 million. And they didn't score very well at all. I mean, the Milton Road one was a score of 1.64, and the US 250 Louisa Road Route 22 was only 0.78. So the chances of them getting approved or at that rate are slim to none. So I proposed an alternative where that aligned State Route 22 with Milton Road so the intersection then would be a single roundabout with 250. The total cost estimate, even with the VDOT inflation factors, came out to about 16 million. And I think the score would be much higher, so it might have a better chance. So Sean has all the details if you want to consider that when you get to that on the agenda. So just want to make you aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is everyone in the room who can speak, sir? Can speak?
Oh, well, actually, I was going to say something.
This is
All great.
All matters from the public. Okay, 3 minutes to.
Actually, my name is Paul Grady. I haven't been here in probably almost 10 years. I used to come regularly. You all are considering the trail from Charlottesville to the Blue Ridge Tunnel. And I read in a recent email from the county that they're going to pay for the design, 3 designs, 3 potential designs. 25 years ago, when Ann was the chair of the charge committee, I presented this proposal of a transit rig from Crozet to Charlottesville. And Ann went to the president of Buckingham Branch Railroad and talked to him about it, and he said yes. And then they went to the CSX, and they said, okay, if you can provide $1 million insurance policy, that killed the project. So now that the state owns that railroad, I would like to see that concept studied alongside the trail design concept, so that one idea doesn't preclude the other. And work really hard to get the 2 bridges, the Brunley Road and Graff Bridge Road, bridge is built wide enough for dual tracking. So, I don't want to see that extra width on that bridge only used for a trail when it could actually be used for both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. Is there anyone else online who would like to speak? Okay, if we can close that portion of the action to the public, and I see that Julia Monteith is with us, and so we'll need to take a vote to allow Julia to join us.
Yeah,
Yeah, are there any other non-voting members that are on?
No,
No, and she can participate electronically. Since she's a non-voting member, we don't actually have to vote to approve her participation, because she won't be voting.
sorry, I led you incorrectly on that, my apologies.
And, yep,
Okay, so there's nothing special.
correct. She's allowed to participate.
Nice to see you, Julia.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, everybody. I have a cold, so I don't want to expose you, so remote.
Okay, so we have an agenda in front of us and wanted to know if there's any requested changes to the agenda. If not, could I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Second. A motion in a second. Oh, we call the roll or just do affirmation?
Need your affirmation.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, and then we have January 25th, 2023 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any revisions that need to be made to the minutes?
Yeah, my apologies, Mr. Chair, this should actually be the March 21st meeting minutes.
So we have the March 21st,
Yes.
2023 meeting minutes. Any revisions necessary?
Move your approval.
All in favor? Okay, aye. Great. So the next item on our agenda is a public hearing for the FY 24 to 27 Transportation Improvement Program. Mr. Nichols is going to take us away.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Councilor Pinkston, MPO Policy Board, in your packet, there's a draft FY 24-27 Transportation Improvement Program. In the packet, you will notice that there are several projects, one interstate, 2 primary, 2 secondary, 3 urban, and then 5 sets of group projects. And of course, we've included CAT and John information as well. In the 24-27 tip, we have included the adopted 2023 MPO and state performance targets and measures. This 2045. The 2045 LRTP is the basis of this new tip and the JAUNT program. The information that's provided, at least at the time that the document was drafted, included information from JAUNT, but there is some I think revisions to their capital plan pending. The recommendation this evening would be for the policy board to review this and to approve. There have been no public comments received as of really today. The MPO Tech Committee reviewed this draft at their May meeting. They recommended approval. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I think we've got some VDOT staff available in case I cannot answer any specific questions.
Okay, are there any questions from the board? Tip?
I can't find it, Ryan, maybe you can direct, is there a section in here about the ongoing multi-jurisdictional study work, like on the trail, like the 20 South Trail, or is that something that's not? We would have to go on with, have dollars in cash.
Yeah, Supervisor Malik, I do not recall that information being in the tip.
Okay.
I would like to ask a very basic question, sorry for doing that. So the funds that are identified here from the federal government, from the highway administration, from the transit. So for example, with the Belmont Bridge or with the in the street, streetscape project, those federal funds that are identified here, how do they actually end up in the project? Is that coming from the VDOT? It's not the conduit for this funds?
Yeah, VDOT would be the administrator of the funds for the region. Or FTA.
Any other questions? How about anyone online? Okay, so I believe we need to open a public hearing, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so it's here. Now opening the public hearing, it is March 1. Asking if there's anyone online or in person who has any comments on this topic. Okay, going once. Going twice. Three times, so we can close the public hearing. Okay, is there any other discussion from the policy board that the public hearing is closed? Second. Okay, let's just do affirmation, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so I think that takes care of. John, would you? Okay, sorry. Okay, also it's unanimous, adopted the tip. Okay, fantastic. So now we're going to move to amendments.
Yes, sir, Chairman Kingston. Included in your packet are or is 3 sets of minutes for the 21-24 Transportation Improvement Program. The changes are, the amendments are only in federal fiscal year 2023. And those changes are happening in traffic and safety operations, preventative maintenance and safety preservation, and in preventative maintenance for bridges. So on your screen here, the amendment would be to the old table shows $4 million. The updated table would show $6 million. For preventative maintenance for bridges, the old table shows 16 million, 16.4 million. The updated table would be roughly 21 million. And preventative maintenance and system preservation, the old table shows approximately $44.5 million. The new table will be just over $55 million.
Okay.
These are projects where the money's being moved around, these are all projects that were already not over there.
Yes. From my understanding, yes.
Yeah, these are groups, so they cover a group of small projects that are within the description. What it's called, preventive maintenance, whatever, operation, different ones. And we do that because when you have small projects, there is a sliding scale that make changes to funding, you have to be constantly doing amendments if the projects are small. So we group projects like paving or bridge work that makes sense to group. And then the changes are really reflective of our federal programs section at VDOT, making decisions about how to allocate money to spend as much as possible of the state's obligation authority.
So within a group, if an individual project is below or above, you don't have to amend, you can move from one
It's
project to
within
the
a-
other.
You look at the whole group as one lump sum, right?
These are all amendments, so we have posted them on the website for the 15-day comment period, and they will require action from the policy board.
Questions, how are we entitled to another 10?
This is new funding that's identified, so it's not being moved from one. It's not being moved within the region from another project, but are you able to provide any information on where this funding is coming from?
I don't know specifically about these exact dollar amounts, but it is either money that is new through additional uplift, federal uplift. We're getting more money from the federal government now than we were before under the new legislation. It's also possible that that previously they were using a different fund type to cover some of these projects, and now we've switched that from state to federal money, and so it's reflected here. What you're seeing here is so you know the state money is. So that's just kind of the, I hate to call it a shell game. I don't mean that in a tricky way, but it's just how it's reported. Moving the colors, moving the colors of money around in order to be able to obligate all that we have across various types of population areas, eligibilities, the fiscal years. We try to spend all this money first. That sort of thing.
Okay. So let's see. Yeah, do we have any other discussion for the policy board? Okay. So minutes from motion, please, to approve the minutes. Second. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Fantastic. Moving on along. Item 6, FY 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. Shackleton, request a brief update, please.
Yes, we reviewed the draft work program at our previous meeting in March. So this is the opportunity that we have to go ahead and adopt the work program that was presented to you. So just as a summary, the work program covers the new federal funding as well as the state and local match that is going to be allocated to our MPO in federal fiscal year or in fiscal year 24. So you'll see based on this table, which we reviewed last time as well, this is the total of the new fiscal year funding that we will be receiving for 24 from the FHWA VDOT side. And then we had some rollover funds from both our passive rollover from fiscal year 22 and active rollover from this current fiscal year in the amount of approximately 300, not as a rollover, but 130,000 as a rollover for that total from the FHWA VDOT side. And then we will be spending down our FTA and DRPT funding allocations this year. So the only funding on the FTA DRPT side will be the new fiscal year 24 funding. So we're looking at a total operating budget of 516,000, and then the state also commits additional funding for their staff to be engaged through our MPO. This does not come through the MPO budget. So we presented the draft work plan at the policy board meeting last month, and I just wanted to note that we have made one revision to what was presented to you last month. And that is that we have added $13,000 from the on-call services contingency task. We've reduced that by 13,000. And we have increased the line item for the comprehensive safety action plan task that is intended for the MPO staff to provide additional support for the development of the comprehensive safety action plan, in addition to what was allocated or what was awarded through the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. The reason we did this is because as we have been working on scoping this project, VDOT has indicated a desire to be engaged in this process, and that would be really beneficial to the region to make sure that we have the state as a invested and engaged stakeholder throughout this process. And so in order for us to do that well, we needed to identify some resources to support their staff involvement. So we have reduced the TJPDC and the MPO's staff budget in the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant by $13,000 in order to be able to support the budgetary needs for VDOT staff to be engaged in this. And so we are requesting that we make that adjustment in the MPO's budget in order to support the ongoing staffing for this project from the TJPDC side. Otherwise, we did review the tasks that were included in the draft work program at our previous meeting. We did present the adjustments to the MPO technical committee at their meeting last week, and they did recommend approval of the unified planning work program with these revisions at their meeting. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
State to say that loud, see if I got it. So VDOT staff for the Safe Streets for All participate, the cost for that's 13. So that eliminates some of the work they will do, replaces work that the TJPD staff will do. So it's augmented. So you're taking the 13 to allow that to happen.
Yes, we're using 13 of grant money to pay for VDOT staff rather than TJPDC staff, and instead we're going to cover PDC staff time through the UPW.
Got it.
And VDOT was always scoped in to be engaged, but we didn't have dollar amounts yet on what that compensation would be, so it wasn't written in.
But VDOT's participation is a net gain over what we had prior. Excellent. Any other discussion from the board?
It's not a funding question, but it's a timetable question. So you're already doing the preparatory work for the Safe Street. In the next few months, we have a partial update or something.
Yeah,
We are now officially under contract and have met with all 6 jurisdictions. We still want to meet with VDOT. We still want to do a little bit more work until we do an official kickoff and get it going, but yes.
You can see it, you guys mentioned by summer 25. Do I remember that being kind of backstop?
we're getting ready to go through procurement. That's going to be a pretty substantive process, but we should be able to have consultants procured hopefully by mid-August.
Okay, any other discussion or questions? Okay, would someone please make a motion to approve the unified planning work for FY22? So, okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? So that motion carries. Great. Item number 7, I think this is a presentation. It's going to happen in Virginia electric vehicle infrastructure deployment.
Yeah, we are pleased to have Ms. Erin Belt with us, who is the decarbonization lead for VDOT, who is going to present tonight on the state's initiatives for the electric vehicle infrastructure deployment. Ms. Belt, would you like me to share your slides, or would you like to navigate your own presentation?
I'd like to navigate if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Right, so I'm going to share my screen and then Sandy, if you'll let me know whether that's showing properly.
It is, yeah, we're still in preview mode, but we can see it well.
That's it.
Perfect.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank all of you for inviting me for coming this evening and also waiting. I know originally we had intended to have this presentation a little bit earlier than tonight, so I appreciate your patience for me to attend, albeit virtually. So for those of you that do not know me, my name is Erin Belt. I'm the decarbonization lead for VDOT in our central office location in Richmond. I joined VDOT last summer after spending about 9 years with DEQ. So state government is not foreign to me, but can confirm that VDOT operates very differently than DEQ, and I am loving this new position. So I wanted to take some time and talk to you tonight about the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, what that means for the NEVI formula funding program. That's the formula funding allocated to VDOT to install charging stations throughout the Commonwealth, as well as our deployment plan. I'll talk a little bit about alternative fuel corridors in the state, the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program, which is also a component of NEVI, but it is competitive. It is not formula funding. How to get involved, and then some significant resources for folks across the state. So for those of you that are not familiar, again, the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, IIJA, that is just another name for the bipartisan infrastructure law. I think if we could give it a few more alphabet acronyms, we could. But this has been signed into law in November of 2021, and this is the funding that provides improvements for roads, bridges, mass transit, including electric infrastructure, as well as other alternative fuels along our alternative fuel corridors. So from the NEVI program, I wanted to specifically talk about what all states, DC and Puerto Rico, have been dealing with when it comes to guidance and information from Federal Highways and US DOT. So in February of 2022, the NEVI formula program guidance was issued. And using only this guidance, all states, DC and Puerto Rico, were required to submit a deployment plan to Federal Highways no later than August 1st of last year. So all of those plans were approved by the end of September in 2022. Currently, funding for all states is available for fiscal year 22 and 23. And not until February of this year did the final rulemaking get published. So for over a year, states have been operating based on guidance only. So if you are wondering why funding has not been deployed yet for phase 1 of NEVI, most of it comes down to waiting for those final rules and standards and requirements to be published by Federal Highways. So where we are right now, VDOT is the lead agency under the Secretary of Transportation. Not all states are operating this way. Some states are utilizing their regulatory agency to distribute these funds, their air agency, or directly underneath their Secretary of Transportation. But VDOT is the lead agency here. Our plan was approved in late September of last year. We will receive over $100 million in a 5-year period to build out Virginia's alternative fuel corridors. And while the alternative fuel corridors focus on multiple types of fuel, the NEVI formula program is specific to electrification for light duty vehicles, so cars and pickup trucks. Right now, we've got $36 million available for fiscal year 22 and 23, and I'm finalizing a competitive process to award these funds. I anticipate after we go to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in their June meeting, with approval from Federal Highway Division Office, that we'll likely be able to advertise at the end of July, beginning of August, to distribute these fiscal year 22 and 23 funds. So I wanted to say a little bit about our plan, vision, and goals. These vision and goals mirror that of the federal program to close charging gaps, maintain reliability and connectivity, and most importantly, ensure equitable access. So if you aren't familiar with the Justice 40 initiative under the Biden administration, it is a new equitable program that's been developed to ensure that 40% of the benefit of federally funded programs are realized in disadvantaged communities. That does not mean 40% of the dollars, it's the 40% of benefits. So we are waiting for additional information on how to gauge that and measure that, because that is data that we are required to report to federal highways. So where we are right now, we're still in phase one. We've gone through the process of nominating additional alternative fuel corridors in round 6 last year. Round 7 is now open. It just opened last Friday. In addition to nominating additional electric vehicle corridors and corridors for propane, hydrogen, and natural gas for light duty vehicles, there is a call for the first time to provide input on freight electrification corridors. So Federal Highways has taken the initiative to go ahead and already nominate the National Freight Highway System that's existing. And then state transportation offices are asked for input if necessary, whether they need to be updates or changes. I'm sorry that these photos are a little bit too small. The top map is mapping of the electric vehicle readiness study that was completed by one of our consultants in the last couple of years. And then VTrans identified additional corridors of state significance. So if you are looking at those maps, there's a distinct difference between what's been listed for electric vehicle readiness versus additional statewide corridors of significance. So during this round 7 nomination process that closes next month, we've only got about 4 weeks to undertake this process. We're also looking at what additional corridors need to be nominated for electric vehicle, as well as propane, hydrogen, and natural gas for light duty vehicles, including if there are any updates necessary for freight. And I anticipate having a public survey open in the next couple of weeks, and we'll share that with you so that if you and your membership would like to provide input on that survey, that you're welcome to do so. So I wanted to just highlight that our deployment plan is an iterative planning process. So the NEVI program requires that states' deployment plans be updated annually. Again, we are still waiting for guidance 2.0 to be issued from Federal Highways. We've been told this week that likely it will be issued in the next 2-week time period, but we anticipate having to submit this by August 1st. And a lot of those updates come in the form of what type of procurement process have you decided to undertake? Have you installed additional stations? What type of outreach has been conducted? And how are you involving communities in determining where stations are going to be located? So right now, these are the alternative fuel corridors for light duty vehicles in Virginia. We've got roughly 985 miles along these corridors. At this time, because of the distance requirement from an alternative fuel corridor and the distance between stations, I-66 and I-495 are considered to be built out. So until we install charging stations across the remaining AFCs in the state and reach a fully built out status, we won't take NEVI funding and go back and build redundancy on those roadways for 66 and 495 with the NEVI formula funding. There's a caveat to that we'll get to a little bit later. So these, I meant to go back and pull newer numbers, but for better or for worse, these don't update very quickly. But I pulled these numbers in February from the Alternative Fuels Data Center. We've got roughly 1,100 public stations across all charging port types at all speeds. So that sounds like a lot, but when you get down to the brass tacks of the requirements for NEVI, we've only got 137 stations that are publicly accessible with DC-FC chargers. Those are the level 3 fast charging stations, and only 17 of those stations meet NEVI requirements. The basic requirements that have to be met to be compliant with NEVI include not being more than 1 drive from an alternative fuel corridor, not being more than 50 miles away from the next compliance station. That's a little bit tricky right now because we don't have enough to fill in every 50 miles. But more importantly, you have to have 4 ports minimum, and they have to be able to charge at a speed of 150 kilowatts per hour, and not reduce that speed if you have multiple vehicles charging from the same charging station. So if you've got 4 ports all hooked to one station, they all have to be able to charge at that 150 at the same time. So along with our competitive solicitation that I hope to open in the next 2 months, we're also working with a consultant to develop an interactive mapping tool. What this will do is show individuals that are looking for host sites or looking to see where stations are existing. I didn't give you a very good legend here, I apologize. But the orange dots generally are where there are gaps in the system. We know that this map is still draft. There are still some gaps that need to be identified, but we are not pre-selecting the sites. So what we will have is a buffer from each of the existing stations, which look like the little markers, the blue markers with the plus in the center. Those are existing NEVI compliant stations in Virginia. Once we have this mapping tool up and ready, folks will be able to look along those corridors, identify exits that they can potentially scope out to find suitable existing convenience stations, shopping centers, or other areas that are no more than 1 drive mile from the alternative fuel corridor, and then work with those landowners for either lease agreements or to purchase property to install those charging stations. In most cases, we'll end up with landowners that are leasing their property and electric vehicle service equipment operators that are owning and operating the stations. So that model is the most frequently expected and existing model. For instance, if you happen to have a Tesla and you go to a Sheetz anywhere along I-81 or in some other areas along 95, you'll see that Sheetz is operating their normal convenience location with traditional fueling operations for gas and diesel, but likely behind the Sheetz, if it's a new one, you're going to see a bank of Tesla chargers. So that's the type of model where Sheetz is doing their normal business operation, likely increasing the amount of area that they purchase for their operation, and then leasing out for that charging operation to another company. So Virginia VDOT does have a public input website. We have a dedicated NEVI page just for Virginia. The link is here on this page. I've sent this as a PDF, this whole presentation to Sandy so that she can distribute it. But this link will get you to our public input website. We have a slew of resources, whether you are just interested in electric vehicles, if you're interested in the charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grants, but we also have additional resources available for local governments if they're planning for electrification in their community. So I wanted to talk a little bit about CFI, the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program. In the past, Federal Highways has talked about this being the community grant and the corridor grant. Those 2 grants together make up the CFI program. So originally it opened in March of this year and applications were due by May 30th. There has been a 2-week extension until June 13th of this year. What I have told most of the localities that I've spoken to about CFI, this came too late for budget planning purposes for most localities. I'm assuming from a budgetary perspective, it's a little bit late for an MPO as well. Having worked for a locality in Virginia before, I recognize that budget talks usually start at the, right after Christmas. You're either in the midst or at the end of it by March, April, May timeframe. So for this to come open in March and then ask for applications by May, it just did not fit with how business typically operates at a local level. But one of the good things about it is learn from what has happened this year, because this is also a 5-year program. And knowing that this exists and will exist for more fiscal years gives localities and MPOs the opportunity to budget in the future if you're looking to do electrification in your locality. Also to point out, VDOT is not applying for this grant. It does not make sense for us to apply for additional funding when we have not yet released the NEVI formula funding in phase 1. If we were to go after this grant, we would be bringing in additional dollars that then have to be distributed. So what we've decided this year is to not apply for a corridor grant or a community grant. And instead, Virginia Clean Cities is providing a statewide application to community charging. And that does 2 things. It allows for them to locate level 2 charging in localities and communities, as well as level 3 charging. So level 3 is the fast charging. Level 2 is a little bit slower, usually between 5 to 10 hours to charge. And you typically see those at like hotels, restaurants, shopping centers, where people tend to spend a long time. So a little bit more about both of those programs. Again, community charging is focused on rural areas, low to moderate income neighborhoods, and communities with limited parking. So think apartment complexes, condominiums, where folks may not own the area outside of their physical structure, or they may be renting. The goal is to deploy EV charging, hydrogen fueling, propane, natural gas, and there's a minimum grant request for both corridor and community charging. Community is $500,000 with a max award. The corridor charging is $1 million minimum with no maximum award. That can be pretty spicy for folks to think about because that's a large dollar amount. But the benefit to these programs is that you can actually have a joint application with another entity, whether it's a locality or MPO or region-wide. With Virginia Clean Cities doing the community program grant, they're asking for letters of support and doing that as statewide. So what does this mean for you? One of the common things I talk about when I give this presentation is, are you an eligible entity? So if you are not a government entity or subcategory of government, generally you're not going to be an eligible entity. So the electric vehicle service equipment operators out there, they cannot apply for this funding, but what they can do is join with a government entity and apply. They can be the entity that provides that 20% non-federal match to this 80% federal subsidy. But does the commitment required make sense for your entity? We've had some small localities ask, what if we purchase this and we install this and we operate, own, and maintain this? That is a significant risk for a locality to undertake because your business is not to own, operate, and maintain electric charging vehicle stations. That is a company that is not you. So my suggestion has always been, work with those companies to come to an agreement, whether it's just a lease agreement, whether it's a agreement where they operate, own, maintain, and do data reporting, and it's not just the dollar amount, that 20% non-federal match that you're looking for. Put the onus on the operator that does this day to day as their business operation, and don't take on that risk as a government entity. Again, can you comply with the applicable requirements? Once I get into some of those with the NEVI standards and requirements, most localities shake their head and say, absolutely not. We don't want to be responsible for that. Great. I'm glad that you know that now and not in year 1.5. So the non-federal match is a big deal. So while this is an 80% federal subsidy to jumpstart electrification, that non-federal match cannot come from another federal program, whether it's federal highway, whether it's EPA, whether it's Department of Energy, because all of those entities are giving out and distributing funds for electrification. So what does that mean? If you're not interested in getting into electrification in your locality, or you're nervous or want to put it off a little bit, how can you provide support now? So providing letters of support as citizens to your local elected officials is a great way to show that the need and the want is there. Local officials can provide those letters of support to your regional commissions, to your MPOs, to your state and federal elected officials, but even more importantly, provide letters of support to those entities that are going after the dollars for you. So if you're interested in joining Virginia Clean Cities as a support entity, that's perfect. Alan and his staff would love to get a letter of support. If you're interested in having electrification come to the Charlottesville, Albemarle area with those federal dollars. And so I have a couple of slides here just for resources. This is a big one. So the bipartisan infrastructure law landing page is on the White House's website. They have a guidebook. There are over 300 programs that are defined to give out and distribute federal dollars for these programs. Not all of them are transportation related, so keep that in mind. Again, there's the NEVI public website, as well as Clean Cities website. And then these are some links specific to NEVI, the CFI discretionary grant, the Buy America waiver, and the last one, if you're just interested in transportation related BIL grants, this website maintained by Federal Highways just has a collection of transportation related. So you don't have to wade through all of the ones on the bipartisan infrastructure law website. And then if you are interested in contacting me directly, my manager, Chris Berg, directly, or if you're interested in being added to our stakeholder list, I keep a list, very, very high-tech Excel spreadsheet of folks that want to receive information from VDOT about our NEVI program, whether we are getting ready to distribute funds, advertise to distribute funds, but also program development updates. I think I've sent out 3 emails in the last 9 months, so you're not going to get spam from me, I promise. And I'm open for questions if anyone has any.
Thank you for that presentation. It was very interesting. Is there a way to bring her back up?
Yeah, do you want to stop sharing, Erin, and I'll?
Sure.
So can someone help me should we submit a letter to she described from this MPO, or is it something that would come from the county and the city governments, those municipalities? I mean, how do we sort of take advantage of this as it might apply in our area?
Is your question about the Virginia Cleans or the Clean Cities support, or?
Not sure what the question is. I saw a presentation of how to grab this money. Well, yeah, so we have the opportunity to invest money in a more robust charging infrastructure in this area, and wondering if there's already plans in place or being developed in terms of what that, or is this being filled by the private market? So.
Well, what we're planning on doing is starting July 1, we have a battery electric vehicle implementation study here to determine where we should be doing these level 3 charging stations in the rural areas surrounding us. So hopefully out of that comes a project that we can use to go after some of this funding.
Okay.
So that's what we are. But
so you would see this as a way to basically help bootstrap what you're wanting to do.
yes.
Do the facilities that are provided under NEVI, don't they have to be located along the corridors? So for example, not at the North 29 location, but along that 64 with the 50-mile difference between.
That's correct. So at this time in your area, 64 is designated as an alternative fuel corridor. I can't remember the bypass, but 29, I'm sorry.
No, there's just cough.
Okay. 29 is not currently listed, but it doesn't mean that it can't be in the future. So there are 2 programs that could fund chargers along 64. That's the NEVI formula program where VDOT is distributing those funds. But then there's also the corridor program that direct application to federal highways is required. So those funds are not coming to VDOT for us to distribute. If you're looking for charging at a level 2 or level 3, in the community, that's the community program. Both community and corridor charging are part of the charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grants. It's not confusing at all. So if you're interested in community charging, Virginia Clean Cities is putting together that statewide, what they're calling a gap application. And then they'll be distributing. So by providing them a letter of support now, especially if you have an idea of what areas of the community would benefit from community charging, that might make you more competitive by receiving funding that Virginia Clean Cities would then be distributing. So they're applying to get the funds, and then they will be distributing to communities throughout Virginia. If you're not ready to do that now, because this is a quick turnaround between today and June 13th, I would still recommend having that conversation with Clean Cities to start that communication if you're not familiar with Virginia Clean Cities and not discussed any of your community's needs with them before. Again, this is a 5-year program, so this is not the only year this funding is going to be available to apply to.
Great, it's helpful. And we were having a side conversation, that wasn't to dismiss, but you're absolutely correct, along that 64 corridor would still give you access.
You know, maybe Lisa, Ravenna, maybe southern part of Albemarle. So, yeah.
So several little questions, and was hearing about some of these, the distance anxiety, which what the people at my weekend meeting were talking about, in the electric vehicle. This was looking at it from the EPA side, electrification, and the greenhouse gas pollution reduction program. So slightly different angle than what you're talking about. But in order to qualify for any of this, do we not have to have designated neighborhoods and demographics and establishment of multiple communities and all that kind of stuff in order to be ready? Or is that what Plain Cities is going to be for us if we went into that community style?
So only one part of an application focuses on disadvantaged communities. That's not the only qualifier to receive funding on any of the formula funding or the CFI programs. So as a Justice 40 covered program, there are mapping tools that were developed specifically for electrification. One of the questions I've had for the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation is that the mapping tool that was provided nationally does not provide enough granular data for any locality or any state. So they have given us feedback that if we have more granular data, especially if there are studies that have been done at the locality level or the regional level, that we can utilize that information to substantiate an application to show that we are serving disadvantaged communities, which is a federal terminology, or communities that are impoverished in the Commonwealth.
Okay. And I know we at Albemarle worked with Alan Hardy probably 10 years ago with the E40, EAB, whatever that happened, the biocell, I think. I know they were involved in getting us a couple of stations during that earlier process. One of the questions I had is there a criteria for these so that it's not just going to be you have to have a Tesla in order to participate? Because I hear a lot of theory. Every Wawa has 15 stations and none of them are accessible except for a very, very limited part of the population.
So there have been talks between Tesla as a company and the White House. The public information available indicates that Tesla will be opening up their stations and what they call a magic dock that allows for non-proprietary charging, but Virginia has not seen this yet. The only stations that I've seen available on Tesla's mapping tool are in New York, primarily in New York, and a couple in California. But one of the things that Tesla's website, their mapping tool does provide is projected stations from a quarterly basis. So quarter 1, 2, 3, 4. But I have asked and been told no, that I cannot have their schedule of operation upcoming in Virginia. But at this time, they've got roughly 6 stations proposed along the entire length of 81. So it does a couple things. It's exciting to think that a new station may potentially have that non-proprietary charging, because what Tesla is very, very good at are installing charging stations. So if they're willing to do that with no federal subsidy, it means that we can give that money to other entities that are looking to install. But it also means that they can apply when our funding opportunity opens. So I don't know how many of Pennsylvania's applications were Tesla specific, but Pennsylvania opened up their funding opportunity earlier this year and closed it about 2 weeks ago. They received over 270 applications. And as the only person working in this program for the entire state, I'm terrified at that prospective number of applications, but I do know a significant number of them were Tesla. There is no indication that we will only be awarding funding to Tesla or any other large entity. In presenting this information to the Commonwealth Transportation Board last September, we were asked how we were going to advertise this funding, and the feedback that we got from CTB members indicated that they did not want us to do a statewide award. So we will not be just awarding to one company, but we also won't be awarding to a single entity to build out an entire corridor. So not one entity will be building along 81 and then one entity along 95. We're going to be looking at a site-by-site analysis, which means that there's just as much opportunity for Tesla as there is for the local convenience store that might be interested in getting into the electrification business.
So that sounds like there's a little more provision for underserved communities to have a chance.
Absolutely.
There was a great concern in other meetings about there being no ability for someone who really could benefit from a lower cost vehicle and really needs the money to be able to, number one, buy it, number two, live in a place where they have access to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of states that are doing corridor wide. Pennsylvania is one of those states, and we chose not to go that route.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for Erin?
Ms. Bell, just to clarify, the letters to, or the collaboration with Virginia Clean Cities, that could happen at the MPO, but it could also happen at the local jurisdictions as well, correct? If they wanted to.
Absolutely. So if the localities wanted to provide a letter on top of an MPO providing a letter that's suitable, I would go ahead and have the conversation if you're not in recent conversations with Alan and his team to let him know that you want to provide that letter and what your interest is. Otherwise, it would just be kind of out of the blue and he's going to call you anyway. So I'm happy you can, all of his contact information is available on the Virginia Clean Cities website. You can actually schedule a calendar invite with him without ever even emailing him because he makes that function available. They are fantastic. And we are very lucky in Virginia to have that group of folks working.
Do you see any follow-up for the MPO and things that?
I don't know at this round if we are ready to move forward, if we have any specific areas of interest identified as an MPO. I think this could be something that we want to have some discussions about, to think about, you know, as Ms. Bell told us, this is a 5-year funded project.
Trainers, is there, your creative juices get flowing at all when you're on this?
Yes. Sorry, asking.
Okay. Yeah, because I wonder too, I mean, I don't know if it's applicable to like PAC, but they're going to invest significantly, I think, in some level of renewable infrastructure. I don't know, some of these monies could be paired up with that or not. How far are we from I-64? It's less than a mile, so many miles is I-64.
I guess.
Up here.
The roadway,
Maybe.
Okay, so if it's within a mile of I-64. So we've got some options.
We can work with there. My question, same question to you. Is there someone in your office who is thinking about this and can help us with a draft letter that we can at least send to get all the interest in. Very good.
When it comes to electrification vehicles, we've been working really closely with Gabe, getting the climate office. I think that there's room for us to be involved.
Great, okay.
All right, well, listen, thank you so much, Ms. Bell, for coming to talk with us. It's very interesting. Thank you for the good work you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
Take care.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, so next item, moving toward 2050. So this is the status update from the Shepherd.
All right, well, I have quite the presentation to follow, so. What I wanted to come back to you all as we're moving forward with our moving toward 2050 long range transportation plan to share some updates with you on some adjustments that we've made to some of the documentation, and then we're going to be moving forward to public engagement starting next month. So the first thing that was in your packet was a memo highlighting some changes that we made to the language. And this was based on to the language around the goals and objectives and then the lenses. So one of the things that started happening as we were working through developing the objectives language specifically is we kept seeing recurring themes that were popping up under every single goals related to things like equity, related to things like climate change, and related to a lot of multimodal concerns. So what we thought is that we could take a step back and sort of indicate how important those themes were by creating this lens framework and saying, before we start really talking about the evaluation of goals and objectives, we are pulling out some of these community values that have been identified through other planning efforts outside of not just transportation, but through the City of Charlottesville, the County of Albemarle's processes, and then also through the state and federal requirements for transportation planning. And so these things are so important that we're going to start by building these into the framework that we're going to use to evaluate our goals and objectives. So we created 3 lenses that we're using. That's climate action, which we talked about in the previous meeting, equity, and then we also added a quality of life lens, because we really thought that we want to make sure that if we're identifying deficiencies in the transportation system and developing priorities for what needs to be addressed, we are keeping in mind that the purpose of the transportation system is to really serve people in the community. So we added the quality of life. We made some adjustments to how we were considering economic development. There was consistently some confusion about economic development and what that meant and whether it was appropriate to include that with land use and what we were trying to evaluate with it. So initially we had economic development grouped with the land use considerations, really thinking about if we were tying together or making connections between community destinations, that would also have an economic development impact for businesses that were also being connected better in the community. And we thought that we could also consider that's one way to consider economic development. But the other way that economic development seems to be measured more consistently, at least with the national goals evaluation, is really through the truck travel time reliability. And so because there was some consistent confusion about the consideration of economic development, we thought it might make more sense to group economic development with efficiency versus grouping it with the land use considerations. So we did make some updated changes based on those adjustments to how those were grouped together. The first is that we are recommending changing the land use goal language to the language that's shown on your screen, connect community destinations in a manner that aligns with local growth management priorities. And then since we moved the economic development to connect with efficiency, we changed that goal language to efficiently and reliably move people and goods through the multimodal transportation system. Any questions on this? This is certainly something that we can discuss further if needed.
That makes sense. There's a lot of thought.
Pondering your economic development around land use. We just had land use neighborhood model design on Route 20. The multimodal connections were stronger in that area. This is a place where thousands of cars. This is where 250 so Riverside and all. The multimodal connections there were stronger. They came in and asked to reduce the square footage of business use. This is not a sport, they're not telling it, I get it. You have to have a hell of, 40-yard dash speed to be able to connect to that place other than by car, and even cars are complicated. So my point being is that the economic development piece around the land use there would be augmented. It wouldn't just be about getting to a shop or a coffee place. The fact that multimodal is not there, is, in my opinion, reduce their commercial activity. It's small scale. So I understand the logic of economic development moving. I wouldn't think it's just about moving goods through. It also has to be about, if you can only get there by car and only one way. You're driving from out Route 20, and you're coming into town, you might stop at Brick to get a cup of coffee. If you're on any other pattern, you're not going there to get your cup of coffee. And the people that can walk there are only the 100 or so homes that are there. So if that's happening on such a small scale, and we stop looking at that, how does that impact like a Seminole Square where you can have it kind of scales out even further because there's not good multimodal connections over there really. I would folks can look to walk to the mall. Awesome. So maybe libraries. Right. So, but that's part of the reason why places like that are not. We all think, well, why isn't the mall the best for mall booming with economic? Because nobody can walk there without taking a left. So, I'm curious. I'm thinking out loud, obviously responding to that. That's where my brain's going. Well, is there room for both considerations? It's not just all one or the other.
Yeah, I think we could leave maybe the language, even if we just change the last goal back to efficiency and remove the specific reference to economic development. I still like that language because it's still about how we're efficiently moving both people and goods through all modes of transportation. So I think the real question is related to the land use, and this was really intended to provide better clarity and understanding for the general population. I think maybe one of the questions that might make sense to ask or maybe have a little feedback on is whether the general public taking that would see like being able to access somewhere like a retail shopping center or a coffee shop or something like that. Would the perception be that that's an economic development activity, or would that be the perception that that's more of like a community destination that is there for their sort of convenience and improves their quality of life by being able to access that.
So economic development, you're wondering if I'm wondering about that term you're talking about, not just like what you're talking about, being able to get the grid or whatever, like the sort of normal daily things, but by economic development or sort of a step change of the overall sort of GDP of the area or.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's room for a lot of interpretation and subjectivity with this. So I think one of the reasons that this adjustment was made is that when we were communicating this, there still seemed to be a lot of confusion around the land use. And so we're really trying to make it as clear as possible as to what we are trying to measure or capture when we talk about land use. So I mean, I agree with everything that you all are saying, that there are certainly economic development advantages to having a well-connected multimodal community.
So that change land use goal and connect community destinations and that lines of local growth and priorities. Is that still getting what we're talking?
I mean, I think it's. I mean, I'm still reacting to the idea. It's not just about like a retail operation that Riverside is supposed to have offices there. But who the hell is going to open up a business if it's a problem with it? I mean, that's why like Belvedere was supposed to have retail on it. The project that was right out of Belvedere Road, the commercial got removed from it. I was opposed to having commercial there, but none of the retail or the commercial elements really have go out and help you. And well, why is that? It's each the transportation of those and the multiple ways to get there. Plays into that, not just because, the modes that create the community destination, but it's a bigger picture of going, what do you need to be economically successful in the area? The multimodal part of that in that. So there would, I would think that it's a better infrastructure around Riverside. Which is not just commuter traffic, it's from part of the area. And then the problems that happen in trying to solve that there. There are other modes to get there, but that would be having more economic vitality than just a coffee shop or a restaurant that's trying to get. There'd be a financial advisor in there, there would be a small medical office or something. If people open up their shop based on how easy it is for their customers to get in and out, not just be a place where a concert or a road front walk is going to happen, right? Again, I'm still.
No, I'm following what you're saying. Yeah.
And do they have to be mutually exclusive? Because I'm looking through the fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
None of these things can be by themselves. And economic development should also include people getting work. Getting employees and residents to their jobs, that kind of thing. So maybe there's a, I'm okay with the latest one myself. And I don't, ambivalent about the others. The quality of life, of course, is over all of those. So I just hope we don't get ourselves too far down the rabbit hole and try to find one secret word and then 10 would be just fine.
Oh, it's more, we've defined areas, at least in the county, we have defined areas where we want commercial activity. But if the infrastructure is not supporting the commercial activity, I mean, we've got vast areas in the development areas that are not being successful from an economic standpoint. So how and transportation plays into that. So what has to happen in the transportation plan to help make these areas that are defined to be economically viable? I guess that's why I'm saying, all right, I get it, where you're moving around. Can't move side of that. Especially with like smart scale and things like that, it points if there's economic activity. That's why we're going to put the pedestrian bridge in. We want to do that alignment for economic.
What if under that land use goal, we left it pretty similar, connect community destinations in a manner that aligns with local growth management and economic development priorities? With that,
I'm happy with the words.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still just reacting to like, well, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Anytime you make a change from one to the other, what's lost from where it came from?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I can be confident you can probably figure that out.
Letting us know it's an important consideration. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't on my radar until we did the
Yeah.
and then the Riverside called right upon it, started on, oh, yeah, these little pockets are not being successful because the commuter route still may be easy in the Starbucks, everything with the drive through will go down to us when fighting on, that's your wall. People have to pull in there to charge the car, with their people, and grab their little sizzling. Get back on the way. And then it's not the center with sizzling. Not all, it's appreciated items.
Yeah, so we already talked about the little graph that's showing arrows pointing everywhere, and this was really intended to demonstrate, as Supervisor Malik had mentioned, the interconnectedness of all of these. And we haven't added the metrics in yet, which are the ways that we will be evaluating the system, as we've discussed through the WIPI gap process where we did the project prioritization. That is giving us the data that we can use to help determine where are there the highest needs related to all of these goals and objectives. And so once we add those in there, there's also some pretty that's also probably going to complicate this more, and I probably won't be able to fit it all on one slide anymore. But the intention there is to also making sure that we're capturing you know, the data isn't necessarily going to align directly one-on-one with all of this. So when we're measuring access to community destinations, that's also really capturing jobs. This is really just a way for us to organize this in order to present how we are evaluating the system.
So the multimodal assistant would be kids to what that is talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just linking it with economic development.
Yeah, so like, for example, we could have a line from if you look at the objective to fill connectivity gaps in the multimodal network, we can also draw another arrow pointing down to economic development, for example. Actually, there was some debate on that, whether to put that fill connectivity gaps with the land use coordination or the economic development. So we can draw more arrows on here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So plan engagement.
Yeah, so the public engagement is planned to start in June. So the purpose of this first phase of public engagement is first of all, to create awareness that we are undergoing the long range transportation planning process. We want to provide information to the public about what the purpose of the plan is, what it is required to do, and how it will be used. And then we're going to start getting high level feedback on the priorities from the public. So we've developed a MetroQuest survey that will allow the public to sort of tell us, out of all of the goals that we've identified, keeping a pretty high level, out of all the goals we've identified, how important are each of these on a scale of 0 to 100? You know, kind of the idea that you give them 100 points and they can allocate those points among the different goals as they want to. And then we'll also give them a map and say, just start telling us where you see problems with the transportation system. Based on the feedback from the consultants that we're working with, EPR, they expect the most valuable comments are actually going to come from that mapping exercise. So we're looking forward to getting that information. And then this will give us an opportunity to use that feedback to determine how much weight to give to the different metrics that we're using to evaluate the data. And then we'll be able to run the data analysis, and we'll have the public mapping exercise, and we'll be able to pull those together and really start seeing where is there like a lot of similarities, and maybe where there's some differences, where there are problems that the public is perceiving that aren't necessarily showing up in the data or vice versa. So just to give you all a schedule, these are tentative dates. I think we might be moving the virtual open house meeting up to 5:30 instead of 6:30, but we're planning the kickoff to occur June 20th, June 21st. There'll be a drop-in open house at the Water Street Center. We'll have the virtual meeting to do some informational sharing, and that will be recorded and posted. We have a MetroQuest survey. If you all are interested, I'd be happy to pull that up and we can look through it. And then I've started working to schedule meetings with the community advisory committees. Mr. Chambers was kind enough to send me the list from the City of Charlottesville with the neighborhood homeowner association contacts for the City of Charlottesville. And then we'll be identifying some high traffic locations to also do some tabling and determine if there are some events that we can also table out as well. My hope is that, you know, once we start meeting with the CACs, once we start doing some of these high traffic locations, and once the word starts getting out, we'll make ourselves available for other organizations that would like for us or are willing to have us, you know, be guests at their events to speak at that. But probably this will be at least 2 to 3 months of really focused public engagement, and we can be providing feedback and updates on you as we start getting some information back. Do you all want to look through the MetroQuest survey, or do you want to wait to be surprised when it's released?
I sent it by email. I would like to see it before we publish.
Okay.
It's one of those things that you all have worked in it so long that you're probably not quite aware of how completely things like this.
Sure.
Really enlightening. I'm glad to be a guinea pig, so you can
Great.
all that stuff.
Great, thank you.
We'll get questions, and so it's always good to have something that we've seen before we get questions.
Yeah, I can send that. It is not active right now, but we'll be happy to send that out for you to look at. Great.
Anything else on that topic?
No, but I think I already went through that information previously, so I think that's it. And if you have any questions or comments, obviously, please feel free to get in touch with me at any point.
I asked sort of the Justice Board question for Aaron was on. In your sort of service needs, missing gaps or whatever, are you using or do you have better demographic data and stuff than what she was thinking about, which is completely really important?
Yeah, we have one of the things that Ryan and Curtis have been working on is updating all of our socioeconomic data based on the most recent census that's available. The other thing that I'll mention, and we'll probably go through this in more detail at our next meeting, but when we start talking about the metrics that we're using, we really did try to take this equity lens approach to developing how we were going to measure what the impacts were going to be for different types of communities. So to the extent that we were able to use some sort of indicator of equity impacts, largely the equity emphasis areas that were identified through the state's planning process, VTrans, we tried to incorporate that as one of the metrics that we would be measuring for under each of the objectives. So we're trying really hard to build equity considerations into the process of evaluating the system needs. What that means is that it may not be very apparent, just looking at this from the identification of needs or a project perspective that's listed, but that's because it's built into the process of prioritizing the system needs.
You'll have to give it to me.
Yeah.
I think that if it's an underserved completely community, then the benefits for whatever you call that. What is to see that?
Yes.
I'm not a mom, so I mean, moms can't hold as far as they understand that's what we're doing.
So we said we use the terms and move on to item 1, small scale status update.
Yes, I had presented to you all at the previous meeting about the general approach that we're taking. And as I had mentioned in that meeting, we are in a position where we have worked through the high priority projects in on the constrained list in our existing long range transportation plan. So we're really looking at what are the pipeline projects that have been identified that might be at a state where they're ready to move forward that have still been identified as priorities for the MPO. So we started talking about that list at the previous meeting, and there were a couple of additions and some revisions that I would like to just talk through. So the first thing that I want to mention is that the District Avenue roundabout project at Hydraulic Road, I realize now that I was not at the action meeting for the Commonwealth Transportation Board, but in the meeting when they were going through the consensus scenario from the Commonwealth Transportation Board, there was an indication that that the District Avenue project, the roundabout at Hydraulic Road, would be recommended for funding in the consensus scenario. Did that occur? So what that
Yeah.
Yes.
So what that means, the Peter Jefferson Parkway intersection improvements access. So what that means is that the District Avenue roundabout project, assuming that this is what's approved in the 6-year improvement program at the meeting next month, is not going to be a project we need to submit for a round 6 application. So that said, this is the list generally of the projects that kind of are ready to go, and with our given staff capacity and with the existing projects that the phase of project development that we are at right now, we're going to need to start identifying the potential projects for improvement as we move through the long range transportation plan. But these are kind of the best opportunities for us to have projects that are ready for submission in the next round of Smart Scale. The other thing I want to mention is that traditionally or historically, we have always been able to submit 4 applications. We are kind of ahead of preparing for this process because after every single round of Smart Scale, the Commonwealth Transportation Board and the OIB staff go back and they make recommendations on adjustments to make for the next round. So one of the things that they also talked about at the Commonwealth Transportation Board is just the staff capacity and the strain that this really puts on staff to go through this process of developing applications. All that to say, we'll assume that we will be able to submit 4 projects because that's what we've always been able to assume, but there could also always be adjustments that are made to the number of applications that we are able to submit. So the projects that are in green are projects that were kind of maybe highlighted a little bit more since I came through the initial list, but I would say that this is the list of projects that are at a state of readiness where we could move those forward to applications.
Does this include Mr. Cohen's?
Well, we have those projects that are listed here here in gray, and the reason that those are in gray is because
Second to last.
this 250 Louis, yeah, that one right there. The reason that those were grayed out is because they were not indicated at this time that those were a high priority for the localities, and those were submitted by the TJPDC, not the MPO. And they also did not score very well. But if there is interest from the policy board, those are projects that we could look at. I would say, I think that there is probably still a pretty strong interest from my perspective, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's probably a desire to continue to look at the 5th Street extended improvements. So previously we had submitted a project to do intersection improvements at 5th Street and was it 5th Street Station Parkway, and also do a shared use path on both sides of the road. So there could be an opportunity for us to look at reducing the scope of that project and resubmitting another project that might score better. And then the VDOT is also undergoing these 2 pipeline projects that will that are intended to prepare projects to be ready to submit in Smart Scale round 6. And those are also being pursued because of the importance they have to the community.
So those would be submitted by VDOT?
No, those would need to be submitted by the MPO or by Albemarle County. Yeah, VDOT does not submit projects themselves. And then the last one I wanted to mention was developed as part of the North 29 pipeline project. That was the North 29 pipeline project, which looked at the area of 29 from Airport Road in Albemarle County up into southern Greene County. And that is this intersection at Boulders Road in US 29, which is the intersection that provides access to Ravenna Station. We have not submitted an application for this previously, but it is one where there has been indicated a significant need. And we do have some recommendations that have been developed that we could further sort of refine as part of the public engagement process.
Can you help me with the timetable for the?
Yeah, I think probably we would want to, we're not going to have projects ready to identify for the US 250 or for the pipeline projects until we're further along in the process. I think if there's anything that any projects that we want additional staff support, we would probably want to make those decisions by September.
So do you want feedback now on these? Or we can, if it's just the introduction and we should comment this?
Yeah, I think right now we mostly need to know if there are any projects decisively that you're not interested in. We can take off the list, and any projects that we need to add that are not on here.
So the bridge, I guess we're currently, we've added into the program with the bridge.
What bridge? Oh, that bridge. No.
That should be covered.
Yep, Jim.
Yep.
I think there's.
Yes.
The Hillsdale South, has there been a whole lot of work done by the city in the last 2 years that would move that anywhere closer to getting going for anything?
I have no idea.
Okay, that's the line for that one. The category of supervisor, in the same way, I mean, the category of supervisors could not agree on the urbanization. Yes, I think the name is probably one. Awarded people like the board too, that was a very upset constituency on that. But that would be one that I would be lower down the priority list. The road road pedestrians, there was something done there. There was a landing, something in the median and crosswalks, but we were supposed to get a blinking light and didn't, or what was the situation?
Well,
Never mind.
I'm trying to understand exactly, but I need to restate part of this. So the district avenue is coming back in at the expense of those two?
It's one.
Yeah, so you go to the parkway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, they've been switched.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you seeing? Is it? Like, is the logic behind that, that the diverging diamond is giving more improvements, where then the hydraulic road becomes more of an issue?
My understanding is that it was based on some development activity that may be occurring where the park on ride was intended to go.
And also, I think. With the hydraulic improvements that are going on, that we just got to kick off for. Having that roundabout queued up to come in sooner than later. Is probably more regionally significant than.
Yeah. I guess the diverging diamond. The parkway, those improvements. The pedestrian improvements, and then what's down the other side of Canton, down the Free Bridge, all of that's finally. It's like all the pieces there. I hate to see the piece get it. Without
This was sort of a late entrance, so I wonder.
the Peter Devers Parkway, it's just the one that you guys put in. You got it.
It was developed through the VDOT pipeline project to study 250. That said, it did score very well, so it could be something that is resubmitted.
For 6.02. Is what it's for.
And the parking ride, that's gonna be a big part of that.
Yeah. And from my understanding, if there's a developer that is coming in there developing, they have concerns about where that parking ride. Is that, and also concerned with the access management that it covers for. So.
I mean, this was the piece that was gonna shut down the one, just restrict the movements, to make it go up further, turn on over.
Coming out of the hospital side. Being able to go straight into the.
So I think, and then as far as the Ravenna River Bike Ped Bridge is concerned, I think we'll know at the end of. Oh, no.
Open road, yes, they were gonna put that, where you come up Pantops, you hit the top to turn right over into, what's the first? Walgreens. No, if you're coming into town, you turn right, you turn left of the guy, turn right. They were gonna do like a slip island. Yeah, and small island there, still did a crosswalk, but then you get past the right turning traffic, right, stand. Yes, and then you can continue across those other, what was over there, 14 lanes to get to the other side. And then the same thing over there for pedestrian, so it was, those were good improvements.
As well as sidewalk to take you down the side to State Farm. Yeah.
Right now, you have to get past the right turning traffic. The through traffic, the two left turn lanes, you know, the two past the median, yeah.
And you've been covered in that direction in the application most every single time. People are flying down that turn lane and then they jump in to a non-existent space right where the pedestrians are going to be trying to cross. So that's
I just remember that's.
yeah, I for some reason I thought that was all, you know, the one funding was on its way. So.
So to be clear, the Wolfen one is not in awarded.
Okay, no, this was from sort of years ago memory that I did before I was even a part of the
And just to provide a little bit more framework, So the MPO, the last cycle or two, has tried really hard to look for projects that have impacts on both localities. That might be a little bit more challenging to do this round, depending on what your priorities are. But the TJPDC also has its applications available. So some of the these two projects right here were submitted by the TJPDC and not by the MPO, but they could be submitted by the MPO if you all determine that there is consensus that those are projects that you would like to support.
Question about
Mhm.
something, it is not on the list.
Okay.
Years ago, this is, you can picture yourself going east on the bypass and cross over the bridge on 29. And the daily disaster of people trying to turn left onto hydraulic northbound. There was supposed to be, you know, the bulldozer taken to that grass strip there and just fill that up and make room for 10 or 20 vehicles in the left turn lane to be able to facilitate the eastbound people to keep going. And that seems to have disappeared from the face of the earth. So we'll just leave that thought with somebody.
So we've been talking about, all the bypass, you're headed east.
Yeah,
But you get hydraulic. Yes, the city had a revenue sharing grant for that. That then got folded in the latest design build. So it's actually, so that the hydraulic are not available.
I think that's what it was.
So now we're managing that under the design build.
Not hydraulic.
Yeah, that's right. The turn lane.
So that's part of the Hillsdale roundabout.
Yeah.
Also, then will be the district roundabout. Okay. Well, that's very good.
And this revenue, I don't know, will not come until well after the hydraulic improvements finished. Hasn't even got the money yet, so we're waiting for it.
Well, I mean,
The Hillsdale Court District gotta be there, so that's fine. Yeah.
the fact that it's had some like free back into it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would also just say that I don't think the Golden Road is ready for prime time.
Okay. We'll take that one off the list then. So what I will do is I will come back to you all next meeting. We will have a slightly shorter list than we're starting off with right now. We'll have some information on the Rivanna River Bike Ped Bridge at that point. And we can start determining what our direction is going to be.
Anybody like the one that the Congress talked about, I think there's another concept that people want to see. Take a stab at and find do that.
Mhm.
I know that was my time back there. Just yesterday, you know, we can be a bridge, and I think the grades are kind of. Yeah.
I would say that. I would say that older. Today's. I mean, I think I understand Supervisor now was very concerned, but today's announcement is not going to make that less. The 29 and older.
I just don't want to have the PPC get out or the MPO get out in front of until we find out what's going on there. Maybe putting it on the list is not effective because nothing to start to trickle. That's different than somebody here in this room thinking we're going to go science, but we're not.
I think what I'm hearing is that maybe should be, if it's going to be considered the project, needs to be accounted so that it's applied. That part of this whole smart scale discussion is going to be a look at what projects MPOs and DVCs are able to submit and make sure they are truly regionally significant projects so that you don't have a whole lot of aid, but this money.
Right, sure. That's helpful.
So I think we would probably move on to item 10. Staff updates.
Yes, we're a little light on this agenda item today, but I think we've had some good discussions. The biggest one that I want to make sure you all are aware of is that we did hear from most of you that the September 27th would be at least based on current knowledge, a good time to have a joint meeting with the St. Augusta Waynesboro MPO. So we are working with their staff. They will be hosting it. It looks like it's going to be at the Fishburne Military Academy. They have a new event center, and it sounds like we're going to be one of the first guests that they get to host. And it sounds like they're planning lots of pomp and circumstance for us. So we're looking forward to to joining them at their facility. That meeting is planned to be between 10 and 12, and then we'll have a catered lunch to follow. And then the only other update I have is, I know that we had come to you last month or last meeting to ask for your support on behalf of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation's Commonwealth Corridor grant application. We did have a follow-up request for the project scope. So DRPT was kind enough to provide that for us. So the project narrative was considered in your packet just for informational purposes.
Say that again. So what is the effect of that?
The effect of the Commonwealth Corridor is basically they were looking for funding for the Commonwealth Corridor to support improved passenger rail access between and along the Commonwealth Corridor, but it would also potentially include a direct connection from Charlottesville to Richmond.
Was there any follow-up needed from us?
No, it's just for informational purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. We provided the letter of support, yeah.
Relating updates. Brings you DDOT, anything else?
That is all.
Oh.
The smart scale was the consensus recommendation for that, and called representative as a whole, 13 projects at about $151.7 million total. So that is a good thing. The hydraulic bundle that kicked off meeting 2 weeks ago, current contracting is the contract, the same contract we had at DDI around about at 251, so they are going to be demobilizing for that to start over at hydraulic, so that is a good thing. At that project, we're trying to figure out the stakeholders that we need to keep updated because it is in the city and also in the county. So we work on that trip, on that as we go along. Then we've got another design build procurement that we're working on, which we're calling the Albemarle County 2, which that includes the John Parkway intersection, 53 Old Lynchburg intersection, 53 and 20 intersection, when you go roundabouts. And we're adding project that was recently awarded this time at Smart Field. That's what they did today. The Rye and Belvedere continuous green tea. So as we're working on the procurement, we're going to add that to it to try to advance it because the projects are literally right there in the same footprint. So that would be in that procurement. And then we've got a 240-250 roundabout that will also be added to it. So that's our next big design build project. Trying to get a public hearing scheduled this summer and an RFP out maybe the fall, winter, and then award sometime in the spring in 2024. So these may slide a little bit in the time to add projects.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But you have to realize
Design.
you've got to do it all at the same time. Design, right of way construction, done all at the same time.
That's exciting. Okay, anyone here for DRPT?
I think she had to step off early.
Okay. Albemarle County?
The comprehensive plan, staff are beginning some public engagement and roundtable stuff tonight, so I think 4 like roundtable events over the next couple of weeks. Let's see, we will also be posting, we will be meeting with the CAC, the 5th and Avon CAC, to discuss the Route 20 shared use path conceptual design project on June 15th. That will be open to anyone. You don't have to be living in that area. And at that meeting, we'll go over a couple of different options that our consultants have brought forward for that shared use path project.
Thank you. Chambers for the city.
So the big news that I have is that we have hired like a coordinator, which is going to be super helpful. That person is currently working for city schools, so we don't get to see the women until school year is over. Once he gets in our office, we'll be helping him establish our childhood priorities. Right now, we've been going through that sort of as part of the gap grant. Now we're looking at all the different projects that we have and seeing if there are different synergies we have, and that includes looking at our transit and energy priorities. Right now, Pat has
some money to spend on shelters and benches. We're trying to figure out where to put those. We're also looking at our Safe Routes to School program from last year. We put in about $100,000 worth of temporary improvements to make sure that our students can get to the school safer, especially in our larger their responsibility zones. We're currently reviewing all of those to see if there are places where we need to fix some of the temporary projects, put new temporary projects, and work hard on some of those projects. Those two priorities, two lists of priorities will also get pulled in with the rest of our priorities. So it's a lot to jump in right now. We're trying to figure out exactly how those things match up. Our dockless permit will be issued to DO by the end of next week. That means they'll be under new regulations that require them to be parking enforcement. So we want to see scooters strewn all over the place. They'll also have to provide an access program to low income residents, and they're going to be required to be more engagement, especially with low income residents. The streets. On the transit side, we are moving forward with our alternative visibility project. That's about to go into a stakeholder engagement phase. We'll have a presentation on that tomorrow at the RTP. If anyone's interested in watching where we're at for that. We've also kicked off the transit strategic plan for CAT. We're on a pretty tight timeline for that. That's transit strategic plans are typically about a year long, maybe a little bit more. We have it until December, and we're just now taking it off. So it's going to be a very tight timeline. We're going to be relying on the work that the RTP has done, the work that we do transit vision, as well as some of the work that CAT has done to do something for system optimization plan for the switch between the routes. We're taking all the analysis with those two projects until we get into this transit strategic plans, and we don't have to need nothing new. There will be stakeholder engagement and public engagement associated with that, and we'll be starting next month. We'll see a survey coming out. We'll see some pop-up events probably at the farmers market, and there'll be some stakeholder engagement events. As well.
Like, how many events in the county? I mean, it's not everybody else.
Yeah, I think we're still to do 2 events in June and 2 events in September, so there'll probably be one in the city, one in the county. That's all I got on the list. So, thank you.
So would you call your phone number if you feel like there's a thing coming into title?
No, if you have an issue with the scooters, look on the scooter, they have their customer service number and email address, and send them the number of the scooter, or you can send it to my school app. But please don't call.
Okay, Mr. Wright.
We're looking at service, about 80% service cutting in Green County and probably about 24, and about 10% cut in Buckingham, and we're eliminating weekend service from Buckingham. Starting July 1.
Okay, I think BPA is off.
Yeah, she had to leave.
Anyone from Federal Highways Administration? Anyone from FTA? Anyone from CTAC? Mr. Conway.
Yeah, nothing, not a lot new. We're still working with staff on the wording for the long-range transportation plan, some of which you've seen. But that's pretty much about it.
Great, thank you, Lee. Any other updates from TJPC? Okay, great. So that's the end of our agenda. Any other matters we need to discuss? No? Okay, great. I think now I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? We lost a grant. Aye.
I don't care what say, but no objection here. They don't.
It's a pretty good meeting when nobody wants to leave.
I say never.
All in favor of adjournment, please rise.
See, maybe we can have.